Hi, Joy. And here I am on my thoughtful Thursday, and I'm a bit later than usual because, well, you know how it is. Your plumber comes when you were expecting him to come tomorrow. So the good thing is I've now got a hand washing area um, that is functional next to my outside cabin. So that's lovely. Now, the topic of today's discussion is all about how we enable our clients to make the best choices for them, which of course isn't easy because often they don't start off knowing what's the best choice for them, and we have to help them in that decision making process. Now, we can do this in a number of ways. We can do it by telling them what's worked for us, we can tell them what's worked for other clients, what we've heard about the NHS, local midwives, local services, um, which is all well and good. You know, it's all information that helps people make decisions, as long as we don't load it with our bias. And what I mean is, if I tell them that all the local midwives are coercive and, you know, they'll maybe report them to social services if they make choices that are outside of the guidelines, that's going to skew my client's view of engaging with the NHS or not. So best leave our stuff out of it, even though we know what a state the NHS is in. We know that they can't always actually provide what they'd like to provide. Um, but yeah, we need to help people navigate this really difficult time of, yeah, of uncertain support, you know, when they're looking for support and all they need to know is who will be at the birth, and that people can be relied on and that they won't be reported unnecessarily to social services. So I've run a pregnancy group for, well, 13 years in Glastonbury, and I think 5 years before that, when I was an independent midwife in Portsmouth, I ran a home birth support group. And it's all about empowerment, but not that we give people the power, but that they find their own power and strength in making their own choices. We can't empower people, I don't believe. So, how do we do that? Well, people come along to my groups. Um, they've often heard tales about the NHS. Perhaps they've had friends that have been reported to social services, and it sort of puts them off engaging with the NHS. Now, I do understand why, but having been a midwife, I also understand there are sometimes advantages to accepting various tests, investigations, scans, um, and even having treatments sometimes in your pregnancy or intervention in your births. You know, some of it can be life saving now and again. So, yeah, it's how to navigate what care you actually need. And it's a common theme in our village prenatal group, a common theme, you know, that people maybe don't want to engage with the NHS, but are frightened that if they don't, that then they'll be reported to social services. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So if you don't engage with social services, you might be reported to social. If you don't engage with the NHS, you might be reported to social services for all sorts of spurious reasons. If you do engage with the NHS, they may find a reason to refer you to social services, and social services shouldn't be seen as a threat. You know, I think it's used as a threat by some midwives. Um, it shouldn't be used as a threat. It's a service which can provide support for people and actually help babies if babies are at risk, at severe risk. And I know we've had a case here locally, um, where that's the case. And we know in the majority of cases that babies aren't at severe risk if their parents choose not to engage with the NHS, or maybe to free school, or homeschool, and to free birth, and to have autonomous pregnancies, and any other number of things that are viewed with suspicion sometimes. That doesn't mean that the baby's at any risk, that anyone's at any risk of anything. Um, yeah, so it's helping people navigate the least most difficult route. So when we talk about things like blood tests, so it's really good if people know what the blood tests are for, what they can detect, what they can't detect. The same with the urine test, at booking, because it's okay having a urine test, but what if they detect GBS, and then you're down the GBS pathway with everything that involves? So explain to people what the tests involve. Explain to them about the things that we can detect and can't detect, especially with scans. So on a routine scan, we miss about 50% of heart defects. I know they're getting better and better all the time, but we still can't detect everything. And sometimes we detect things that worry mums and dads in the pregnancy. And what I mean is, if you get something like an echogenic gut, so they've seen something in the baby's gut and they don't know what it is, or you're told your baby has a cyst on the brain, or it has kidneys that are bigger than usual. All these things can be really, really worrying for a parent, thinking that their baby might have severe problems. Oh, short limbs as well. Short limbs come in, quite often into this category. Low-lying placenta, another thing to worry about that's not usually a problem. It's just something that needs monitoring. So as long as people are given all this information, then they can decide if that's the right way for them to navigate their pregnancy or not. And it's always a balance between fear and trust. So some people have an awful lot of trust in their bodies and in the birth process, and don't seem to seek that external validation. And that is great. That is truly empowered, and I really like to see that. That's fabulous. But what we most often see in our groups are people who don't know the best way for them and are trying to make those choices, and they can only make the choice with lots of information and the chance to talking through all the pros and cons, and not being pushed to make any decisions. And I have to admit that although I don't put my opinion on what people should do or not do, I do tend to advise people that if they can imagine engaging with the NHS a little, then if they would need to transfer to hospital at any point in the pregnancy, birth, or afterwards, it won't be a total shock to the NHS, and they won't then get their knickers in a twist that you're not on the computer and they can't find you and they've got to do a whole booking and all that stuff. So if you engage with them in your pregnancy, then you don't look like you've got a concealed pregnancy. You're not avoiding care, but you can make informed decisions about what care you would like and what care you wouldn't like, because it's all an offer. It's a service. And when I was a midwife, I was a professional servant. I was there to provide a service to the clients, to the customers, to the consumers, the people that are paying in their taxes for this service. So my job wasn't to tell them what to do. It was to offer what is thought to be effective and useful care. And some of it is, and some of it isn't. And I was always totally honest with my clients. When we talk about listening to baby's heart in labour every 15 minutes in the first stage, we can really unpick that. I've got to advise you of this because it's in the guidelines, but is that based on best evidence? No, no, it's actually not. Are we likely to save more babies if we're listening continually? No, actually, we're not. So, yeah, being honest with the information that's out there is so important. So, yeah, it's these nuanced discussions with people and ultimately standing with them when they make their own decisions because it is their path. And despite what we might advise, and I certainly had this as an independent midwife when occasionally I'd advise people to, let's say it's a breech baby, and I might advise a hospital birth just in case extra help is needed. Um, yeah, and they wouldn't take my advice. I mean, some did, some didn't. But if they didn't, it's not my job then to bully them and get them into hospital or to say that I'm not going to care for them because, yeah, my job is then to stand with that person and, yeah, accompany them on their journey. Yeah, so I hope that's helped. You can always put questions underneath about, yeah, how we help our clients make these really difficult decisions and our role in that. Because it isn't our role to persuade anyone of anything except that their bodies are capable and that they can do this. So I'll leave it there. I'll join you next Thursday at 4 p.m. for Thoughtful Thursdays. Lots of love.